"Don't touch that, Leo." Julian Vance's voice hissed through the phone. Sharp as a whip, his eyes glued to the glowing screen of a video call with Japanese investors. But the warning came too late. A piercing crash echoed through the glass and steel atrium, as the 9-year-old's white cane struck a $250,000 glass sculpture. The artwork shattered into 1,000 glittering shards across the marble floor. Leo flinched, stepping back, his clouded eyes widening in fear. "I told you to stay still," Julian roared, finally ending his call. "Do you have any idea how much this is worth? More than most people earn in their entire lives." But Julian didn't notice his son's trembling steps. One more, and Leo's heel would land on a razor-sharp shard. Before disaster could strike, a rough, steady hand touched the boy's shoulder and pulled him gently back. It was Martha Jones, the new housekeeper. She said nothing, only nudged the most dangerous shards away with her shoe. Julian didn't even look at her. "Clean this up," he ordered coldly. "And if you ever let that boy near anything valuable again, you're fired." He didn't see the sorrow in Martha's eyes for the boy, nor the quiet resolve behind them. Julian Vance thought he had dismissed just another servant, but in that moment, he had overlooked the one woman who could rescue his son from a darkness far more terrifying than blindness. He saw only a cleaner. How could he have seen the keeper of a secret no amount of money could ever buy? Julian Vance always thought of himself as a devoted father. He liked to emphasize that fact to the press, to his board of directors, and most of all, to himself. "I flew to Germany 3 times in 2 weeks to find the latest stem cell transplant for my son," he often bragged at cocktail parties. But anyone listening closely would hear that it wasn't the confession of a grieving father. It was a CEO's progress report on a failing investment. The mansion in Chicago, with its cold glass walls, its spiraling steel staircase, its marble floors polished to a mirror's shine, looked more like a museum than a home. Everything gleamed, but nothing felt warm. Leo, 9 years old, grew up inside that silence. He couldn't remember the last time his father's voice carried kindness. What he remembered were commands, sometimes a bark of irritation, never comfort. He learned to read his world by sound. The sharp echo of leather shoes like hammers striking marble. The heavy cloud of expensive cologne that announced his father's presence. He knew his father loved the company more than anything else, and in those rare moments when Julian glanced at him, Leo felt like nothing more than an expensive failure. Another research project that had swallowed millions without results. When Martha Jones first entered the mansion, she was like a crack in the flawless glass. A black woman in her 60s, solid in build, hands roughened by years of labor, her soft-soled shoes barely made a sound on the floor. No one paid her much attention, just another cleaner hired through an agency. But she carried something no one else in that house possessed. The memory of a world where healing wasn't bought, but offered through touch and belief. Her grandmother, Mama Rose, had been a root doctor in rural Georgia. She knew which roots soothed fever, which leaves eased pain, and which whispered prayers calmed the soul. "Every plant carries a spirit, every stream a message," Mama Rose used to say. Martha grew up inside that circle, learning to notice what the hurried world overlooked. She was no stranger to the arrogance of wealthy men. Years of cleaning their houses had taught her how quickly they proclaimed money could solve everything. But Martha knew some wounds could never be reached by medicine from a hospital. And the first time she saw Leo, a small boy sitting quietly in a cavernous room, fingers clutching an old teddy bear, she recognized a wound no doctor could heal. One afternoon, in the back garden, Leo followed the sound of birdsong and shuffled outside. Martha sat on a bench, gently guiding his small hands across different objects. A rough oak leaf, a velvet rose petal, a sun-warmed stone. "Can you feel it?" she asked, her voice warm as the afternoon sun. For the first time in weeks, Leo smiled. "This one's warm." "Yes," she said. "That stone tells you the story of the sun." His laugh bubbled out, light and clear, like the rare splash of water in a silent pool. Julian stepped into the garden just then. Instead of smiling, his face tightened. "Martha, my office, now." In the sterile room hung with abstract art, he hurled a folder onto the floor. "I hired you to clean, not to play farmer in my garden. Pick it up." Martha bent, gathering the scattered papers one by one. She didn't argue, didn't explain, but her silence carried a weight that unsettled him more than any defiance could have. He felt challenged, not by words but by her quiet refusal to be diminished. That night, the mansion sank into its usual cold hush. Julian had gone out to a lavish dinner, leaving behind a suffocating emptiness. Leo sat on his bed, clutching his teddy bear, his cloudy eyes fixed on nothing. Martha entered softly, her shoes soundless, the familiar scent of soap and pine wood following her. She sat beside him. "Leo," she whispered, "do you believe in miracles?" "Dad says miracles aren't real," Leo muttered, voice hoarse. "He says there's only science." Martha smiled, the kind of smile that had soothed countless children back in Georgia. Science is just the name people give to miracles they already understand. From the pocket of her apron she pulled out a small glass jar filled with a deep green ointment, catching the glow of the bedside lamp. Its fragrance filled the room, earth after rain, crushed leaves, something alive and ancient. "This is my grandmother's recipe. 6 generations of women used it to heal when the city doctors turned their backs." She spread a thin layer across his eyelids and pressed her hand over his small fingers. "Now close your eyes. Tell me what you see." The pause stretched long. Then, in a trembling whisper, Leo said, I see a spark, like a tiny star far away." Martha's heart pounded, but her voice remained calm. "That's good, son. That's a seed. You and I will tend it together until it grows." Leo's lips curled into a fragile smile, hope flickering across his face for the first time in years. Martha knew the road ahead was dangerous. Julian Vance would never understand. He would sneer, call it superstition, call her a fraud. With one phone call, he could destroy her. But when she saw that flicker in Leo's eyes, she realized she had no choice left. She would fight for this child, not with money or prestige, but with the wisdom handed down from her ancestors and a love that asked for nothing in return. Outside, Julian was preparing a press conference to announce the breakthrough of his celebrated doctors. He believed glory was about to shine on his family. He had no idea the true miracle had already taken root under his roof, and soon it would explode like a time bomb, destroying everything he had built. For the first time in years, Leo wasn't lost in darkness. He had glimpsed a promise. If you believe kindness can create miracles, stay with this story. Because what comes next will prove that the greatest miracles often begin with the smallest acts. In the days that followed, the Vance mansion became the stage for 2 plays unfolding in opposite worlds. By day, Julian was absorbed in international calls, growth charts, and contracts worth hundreds of millions. By night, when the dim yellow lamps glowed through heavy drapes, Martha transformed Leo's room into a different universe. The boy began to change. He stumbled less. He could hear a bird outside the window and whisper, "I see yellow." One morning, he held his teddy bear and said, "It feels darker. Maybe today the sky is cloudy." His murmurs were like a trickling stream, slowly thawing the ice that had entombed his world. Julian noticed differences too, but only through his own narrow lens. On a call with Dr. Miller in Switzerland, he boasted, "His pupil response is up 12%. Clearly, the treatment protocol is working." He never knew, or refused to know, that every percentage point he bragged about was born not from medical breakthroughs, but from jars of homemade ointment and the soft encouragement of a woman he barely acknowledged. To Julian, everything could be bought. Medicine, recovery, even miracles. What he failed to see was that some kinds of light cannot be measured, cannot be priced, and will never belong to him. To celebrate his success, Julian decided to stage something grand. Not just a party, but a performance for all of America to see. He invited a celebrated national news anchor to conduct an exclusive interview right there inside his mansion. "We'll show them the power of Vance Industries," he declared to his PR team. "Nothing is impossible when you have enough resources." Martha overheard his words while scrubbing the floor outside the meeting room. She bowed her head, but her chest tightened. Leo would be paraded as proof, a trophy displayed to validate wealth and power. That evening, Martha called her niece Sarah, a journalism student in Atlanta. Her voice trembled. "Sarah, they're going to use that boy as a prop. They'll lie to the whole world." On the other end, silence lingered before Sarah finally said, "Aunt Martha, if they plan to tell a story, then we need to tell ours too. And our story has to come with evidence." Martha clutched the phone, her hands damp with sweat. She had never imagined herself standing against a man with such power. Yet Sarah's words felt like a lantern lit in the dark, pointing to a path she had no choice but to follow. From then on, Martha began recording everything. Her old phone became a silent witness. She filmed Leo identifying the red ball by touch, filmed him carefully making his way down the stairs without his cane, and filmed him laughing as he recognized her shadow on the wall. Every clip was stamped with dates, every image a shard of undeniable truth. One evening, as they sat quietly together, Martha leaned toward him. "Leo, I need your help. They're about to claim that expensive treatments cured you. But you know what really happened, don't you?" The boy shook his head fiercely. "No, it was you, Aunt Martha. It was your medicine." "Then are you ready to say it out loud, even if it makes your father furious?" Leo was silent for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand tight. His eyes, now able to distinguish light from dark, gleamed with unexpected resolve. "I'm not afraid. You showed me how to see, and now I see everything clearly." Martha felt a swell of pride and fear. Inside that fragile body, a new strength was being born, the strength of truth. The day of the interview arrived. Television trucks lined the driveway. Technicians rushed about, setting lights and adjusting cameras. The mansion had turned into a studio set. Julian, dressed in a silver-gray Armani suit, strode through the house like a king in his palace. He passed Martha, who was polishing a final smudge from the floor. Without looking at her, he muttered, "Stay in the kitchen today. I don't want you ruining the frame." She nodded, her hands steady on the cloth. But in the pocket of her apron, her old phone was fully charged, loaded with the videos Sarah had carefully edited. Leo sat on a sofa, wearing a small navy suit. He shifted uncomfortably, his lips pressed tight. His young heart knew this day was more than a conversation. Today was the day he would choose between silence and truth. Diana Walters, the renowned anchor, settled across from Julian with a bright smile. A technician raised his hand. "Ready in 5, 4, 3. The red light on the main camera blinked alive. Diana turned her gaze to the lens. "Good evening, everyone. We're here at the mansion of tech billionaire Julian Vance to hear the extraordinary story of a modern medical miracle." The whole world was watching. They were expecting a tale of money and technology. What they didn't know was that within minutes, they would witness lies unravel and an empire crumble, live on national television. Studio lights bounced off the glass walls of the Vance living room, making the cold space almost blinding. Julian Vance sat upright, shoulders squared, his face carefully powdered to hide fatigue. But he wasn't tired. He was exhilarated, as though stepping into the biggest IPO of his life. "As a father," he said, voice deep and practiced, "I did everything. When the world said impossible, I told them, turn the impossible into possible." The camera zoomed in. A glistening tear at the corner of his eye made viewers believe he was moved. But it wasn't love. It was the smug satisfaction of a man convinced he had fooled the world. In his head, numbers drummed, stock prices climbing, investors opening their wallets, Forbes printing his face on the cover. He remembered the day Leo was born, when the doctor sighed and told them the child was blind. His young wife had burst into tears. But what had Julian done? He left the hospital that same night to call his lawyer about insurance benefits. Holding his son? He never had. And now, he was playing the devoted father for the cameras. In this performance, Leo was just a prop. Julian pressed his hand firmly on the boy's shoulder, forcing him to sit straighter. "And here," he announced, voice resonant, "is the result. My son, Leo, can now see the light." Leo stayed silent, his thin shoulders trembling beneath his father's grip. He felt like an object on display, nothing more. From the kitchen doorway, Martha stood hidden, her rough hands clasped together. She knew the decisive moment was drawing near. Diana Walters leaned forward, her smile soft as she looked at Leo. "Leo, Can you tell us what it felt like the very first time you saw light again? Perhaps through one of the advanced treatments your father chose? Leo's heart thudded wildly. He remembered the nights Martha sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering, "You don't need to see the whole world. Only believe that the world sees you." He remembered her patient smile as she smoothed the ointment across his eyelids, her gentle voice, "It's a seed, son." The room waited. Julian leaned in, ready to answer for him. But Leo spoke first. "No, ma'am." The air froze. Julian laughed nervously, trying to cover. "He's still a bit confused, you see." "I'm not confused," Leo cut in, his voice carrying for the first time across the room. His clear eyes turned straight toward the camera, as if speaking to the whole country. "I want to tell the real story." "I can, can't I?" From the control booth, the director shouted, "Don't cut! Keep the cameras rolling." Julian sat rigid, feeling like he was perched on a bomb he himself had armed. "The doctors only hurt me," Leo continued, his voice shaking but firm. "They said impossible. Dad said, too expensive. But nobody told me I could." He drew a long breath, then turned toward the shadow where Martha stood. "The one who helped me was Aunt Martha." Sound drained from the room. A technician dropped his pen, the clatter sharp in the silence. Diana's eyes widened. Julian's face went pale. "Leo, stop this now!" he hissed. "No, I won't stop," Leo replied louder. From his small navy vest, he pulled out a glass jar. "This is the real medicine. It smells like the garden in Georgia, where her grandmother grew the plants." The camera zoomed in on the jar, the audience transfixed. "And I have proof," Leo said, his eyes glowing with determination no one expected. Diana's phone buzzed. She glanced down. An email from an unknown sender with a video link. Sarah had delivered. Diana looked up, her voice cool as steel. "Mr. Vance, we've just received a video. I think we should all watch it together." The large screen behind them flickered on. Footage rolled. Leo identifying the red ball for the first time. Leo stepped carefully down the stairs without his cane, hands trembling but confident. Leo laughed at Martha's shadow on the wall. And finally his whispered words. "It was Aunt Martha who healed me." Dates stamped clearly. Proof undeniable. Whispers spread across the room. A technician muttered, "My God, everything we've heard. It's a lie." Diana's gaze locked on Julian, her eyes stripped of sympathy. Martha remained in the shadows, her face calm, as though she had always known this moment would come. Julian's phone buzzed non-stop. Messages lit the screen. "Urgent. Vance Industries stock down 7% in 10 minutes. Japanese investors canceling contract. Legal team advises preparing for lawsuits." He tried to steady his breath, but his trembling hands betrayed him. In his head, one thought pounded. "This can't be happening. I controlled everything, yet he couldn't control the truth. He couldn't buy the gaze of his own son. Clear, steady, and no longer afraid." Diana's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps what we're witnessing here tonight is not only a miracle, but also a confession that should make us all reconsider." Julian gasped for air. The room spun, the lights crashing down on him like a tidal wave. From the kitchen, Martha laid a hand over her chest, steadying her heartbeat. She didn't need to speak. She knew truth had a power of its own. And so, before millions of viewers, the empire of Julian Vance began to collapse. Not from falling stock prices or broken contracts, but from a 9-year-old boy who had finally found the courage to speak from the darkness. The room seemed frozen in silence after the video ended. Diana Walters lifted her eyes, microphone in hand, and slowly walked toward Martha, still standing in the shadows as though none of it had involved her. "Mrs. Jones?" Diana asked softly. "Do you have anything you'd like to share?" Martha stepped forward. Each step was steady and unhurried, though her heart pounded like a drum. The lights fell across her salt and pepper hair, across the lines etched deep into her face, a face glowing now with a calm resolve. "No," she began, her voice low and warm like a southern breeze. "I don't have degrees. I don't have millions of dollars to invest. But my grandmother used to say, There are wounds no medicine can touch. Sometimes all it takes is another heart willing to sit beside you. A technician standing nearby discreetly wiped his eyes. Diana, who had heard countless polished speeches in her career, could only nod in silence. Julian stared at the floor, his bloodshot eyes hidden, his hand clutching the armrest so tightly the veins bulged. Martha continued, her voice not raised, yet it filled every chest in the room. I don't have shares. I don't have a board of directors. All I had was a boy who needed someone to believe in him. And belief, ladies and gentlemen, heals more than any medicine ever could. She turned her gaze directly to the camera. This child didn't need a technological miracle. He just needed someone to dare believe he could. And I, an ordinary housekeeper, did that. In that moment, the contrast was unmistakable. A wealthy man sitting silent, and a working woman standing tall. Money had lost its voice, only humanity remained. Julian jerked upright as though shoved. His voice cracked, angry and desperate. You set me up, all of you. He spun on Leo, finger trembling as he pointed at his son. And you, after everything I've done for you. Leo froze, his heartbeat rattling in his chest. For a split second, he nearly shrank back into the safety of silence. But then he remembered the nights when Martha sat by his bed, whispering, You don't need to see the whole world. Just believe the world sees you. He took a slow step toward her, his small hand reaching for her rough palm, gripping it tightly. He lifted his head, eyes lit with courage. Dad, you gave me everything money could buy, Leo said, his voice not loud but rumbling like thunder in the hushed room. But Aunt Martha gave me the only thing I really needed. She gave me her eyes so I could see the world until I could use my own. Julian staggered, his lips opening and closing without words. He saw every gaze in the room shift away from him, toward the boy standing upright beside a humble woman. Leo did not stop. You wanted me to be proof of the power of money, but I just want to be proof of the power of love. The words struck like a hammer. Julian collapsed into the armchair, his whole body trembling, vision blurred, not from the glare of lights, but from the truth laid bare. Meanwhile, Leo rested his head on Martha's shoulder. In those arms he felt safe, warm, something he had not known in all 9 years of his life. The interview ended in chaos. Technicians dismantled equipment, reporters whispered. Phones rang without pause. But the final image broadcast to millions was not Julian's fury. It was Martha holding Leo close, whispering into his ear. The boy nodded, smiling through tears. The cameras stopped, but the world had already kept the image. A black housekeeper cradling a billionaire's son in a circle of tenderness. Julian sat adrift in darkness. He had built an empire of glass and steel, yet never built a home. He could track every number on the stock exchange, but he had been blind to the pain of his own child. Martha never brought a miracle cure to sell. Her legacy was an act so simple it revealed a truth vast enough to shake an empire. Daring to believe a boy could see light when the whole world said he never would. Leo had seen one star, then more. And in that light, the world suddenly widened, softened, warmed. The cameras finally switched off. Martha guided Leo out through the great doors. They were no longer Cleaner and the master's son. They were two souls who had found strength in kindness. Julian remained behind, alone in the cavernous room, his phone buzzing with relentless alerts. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt hollow. This story does not end with Julian Vance's bankruptcy. It ends with his recognition that he had been bankrupt long before, bankrupt of spirit. The world had just witnessed the collapse of a man and the rising up of a woman. But the lingering question remained. Would the light Leo found ever reach the darkness in his father's heart? And that is the story not only of a blind boy finding sight, but of the power of kindness. Martha Jones, an ordinary housekeeper, did what millions of dollars and the finest medical minds could not. She gave Leo the belief that he was worthy of love. Julian Vance, who could command markets with a single call, ended up the poorest man alive because he lost the only treasure that mattered: love. This story reminds us that miracles don't always wear the name of science. True strength never lies in wealth, and sometimes The smallest hand held at the right moment can save an entire life. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to Talk Story. Because stories like this remind us the world can still be far more beautiful and hopeful than we dare imagine.